everybody. Welcome to another episode of Heal and Manifest podcast. I am your host, Cynthia Flores, and today I have a super special guest, Christina Giovanna Olivarez, and I will introduce her in a little bit and what she does. But today we're going to be talking about taking up space online and offline and visibility for Latinas to show up for ourselves and how to start showing up for ourselves. So we're going to discuss some of the barriers, some of the challenges that come up around being visible online and offline and what that takes. And also giving you practical ways for you to start showing up for yourself and taking up space. All right. So Christina, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for being here. I know you and so Christina, she is a 4-time award-winning social media and business coach. She's a conference organizer, she's a trainer, and a TEDx speaker. With a passion for online marketing, entrepreneurship, and women empowerment, Christina has impacted thousands of minority-owned businesswomen, CEOs, executive directors, corporate and nonprofit organizations, political candidates, and elected officials over the last decade. Named as one of the top 5 executive coaches to work with in San Antonio. So Christina, wow, I am impressed with all of the work that you've been putting and that you've been doing. And honestly, you are such an inspiration for me. I remember I reached out to you. I don't know if it was like a year ago. I know I was like barely starting to show up online, and it was scary. And at that point, I didn't feel quite ready. I would just recently had launched my business, or I was launching my business. And I was like, what am I doing here? I'm still trying to figure out my brand, who I am, my thought leadership, sort of how do I show this for myself, and how do I want to be seen by my community? It's a lot of things to think about, right? When thinking about showing up and taking up space online or offline. But at that point, I didn't feel like I was ready. And I feel like now I'm like allowing myself and giving myself permission to even like do this podcast and have top-notch speakers like you to teach us, right? To show us the way. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much. And hola, everyone. I am thrilled to be on this podcast and to see you, Cynthia, completely take ownership of who you are and launch the Heal and Manifest podcast. I know that this is going to touch so many lives. So I'm just super proud of you and really thrilled to be a guest.
I'm really happy to have you here. And I guess I'm curious for you, talking about this topic around taking up space, what that looks like. What does that entail? How does that look like for a lot of us Latinas, right? Growing up in communities culturally and societally, we're told to be calladitas, we're told that calladitas nos vemos más bonitas. We're told that, to really silence our truth, to silence ourselves. And that, comes along with a lot of things that I've talked about here in this podcast, but in general in my content around the cultural challenges that come up, right? The mental health challenges that come up, the intergenerational narratives and trauma and things that we carry from our ancestors, right? I mean, we don't only carry that, we carry a lot of strength, a lot of wisdom, storytelling, all of these other things. However, we do internalize growing up some of the times we do internalize some limiting beliefs that keeps us small. And I did want to name that because I do think that those are some of the challenges that I see with a lot of my clients coming in. And I'm sure you will share a little bit of what comes up for you and your clients, but it's the narratives, is the trauma, it's the limiting beliefs. It's a many factors that impact our ability to show up.
I feel like when I was very young, I had this notion of I really wanted to be seen and heard. I feel like as a kid, I was really out there in terms of wanting to be on stage. All my life, I wanted to be a television reporter. And all I could think about was I want to get out of my hometown. I'm born and raised down in the South Texas border in the Rio Grande Valley. So Mexico was, just really right there. We would go to Mexico a lot. And I just felt like as a kid, there was something within me that knew I was destined for more. And I didn't know really what that was. Like, culturally, when we think about leaving our homes or leaving our families, it's frowned upon, right? I'm an only child, so a lot of it was really surrounded by all of my family. My family lived within less than a mile away from each other. And so this notion of I'm ready to go take on the world was really such a hard concept to grasp. My mom didn't go to college. My dad was the first one in his family to graduate and go to college. And so I just knew that I am ready to take up space in ways that just allowed me to be very visible. And one of those ways was television. I was so obsessed with getting my parents' camera as a child and filming myself. I would interview my stuffed animals and pretend that I was the reporter and they were the ones that I was interviewing, even though they couldn't talk. And so I just knew I was ready to do all the things. And that's what I did. I went to college. I took all of the internships. I was very wide-eyed and thought, well, if I do the necessary things that they tell you to do, I will go out and I will find a job and I will go on to Good Morning America and live out my wildest New York television reporter life. So when I got out of college and that didn't happen, it was so devastating to me because I really felt like I failed. I felt like I failed myself. I felt like I failed my parents, especially since, the sacrifice to get me to go to college and to take out student loans and do all the things, right, that they tell you to do. And I just felt like such a failure. And that's when I really had a deep understanding of when I was going to these interviews at the TV stations, so many of these news directors were trying to put me in a specific box. I had to look a certain way. I had to sound a certain way. If I didn't like this or if I didn't sound like this, then no one would want to see me on TV. And it was very devastating. It felt like I couldn't fit in and I couldn't belong. And that's when I started really to think about all the things that I learned in college that is in the communications field, but wasn't television. And at that time, I was also obsessed with the internet. I was on the internet at such a young age. I was on AOL at 8 years old, and I was learning how to utilize at that time MySpace and Twitter. Twitter had just, come on, and of course, Facebook. And so that's when I knew, well, if no one's going to give me a job, why don't I start building the foundations? And that's when I launched the blog. At the time, it was called The Social Butterfly Gown. And this blog was meant to try to get people to see how talented I was as a writer, as somebody who was in the public relations industry. But what I didn't realize was while I was doing the blog, I was starting to build my own personal brand, and people were attracted to my energy and to all the things that I was writing about and creating videos on. And little by little, I was recognizing, instead of waiting for someone to show me the way in terms of a job or a career path, I have to have it within me to blaze that path for myself. And that's where I made the decision to launch my business at 24 years old at the time.
Wow. That is an incredible story. And it takes a lot of courage and bravery to take on that leap of faith, to believe and trust in yourself. And, this thing around being in these spaces where you were told what to wear, how to look like, how to speak, it's that belonging piece is so big for a lot of, first gen Latinas, Latines, because this is something that I hear and this is something that I have personally experienced. And it's so funny that you wanted to do that. And I think that's amazing because interestingly enough, I wanted to do broadcasting too. I wanted to get into journalism. I wanted to get into journalism. I wanted to really explore the world and travel, and I wanted to do like entertainment in Mexico. I don't know if you've heard of Telehit, but there was like Telehit and like the music, because I was super into like rock en español, pop en español, 80s, 90s. And that was my thing. So I would see Telehit and I was like, oh my gosh, I want to do that. I want to be in these TV shows. I want to be, presenting, hosting, like all of these things. And I was like, okay, that was like, I think one of the dreams that I realized, well, maybe I can do that, but in a different way. And given the current situation, right? Like where the online social media, we're saying that we can show up in different ways. Technology has really supported and evolved, and it supported our ability for us to show up in different ways, right? Authentically, raw, vulnerable. And I think that's just amazing, because I was like, okay, well, maybe I can't do that, but I can do a podcast. I can do my own show. I can interview folks. I can, do these things in many different ways, and I can still travel and meet a lot of people and support people and give back to my community in this way. But it had to really take building my own platform, building my own building table, you know what I mean? So it does require that. And sometimes when we are in a lot of these different spaces, we are kind of put in a box, right? There's a lot of stereotypes, there's a lot of microaggressions, there's a lot of things that sense of not belonging, that is, as I mentioned, pretty big, and feeling like our voice is not valuable, our voice doesn't have, we're not worthy, we're not good enough, right? All of these limiting beliefs. But the reality is, like, that's also something to think about, that we are trying to fit in spaces that were not really designed for us.
Yeah, that's honestly one of the reasons why I launched my second business. So I did social media, like my first business, and I still have, they're both together now. But in the beginning days of my entrepreneurial career, I was focusing solely on social media, managing social media accounts for different clients. And every time I would go network, I would run into the same issues. I was often the only Latina in the room. And it was very odd because, San Antonio specifically, we're a good portion of the population. And I was recognizing that if I'm the only Latina in the room as a business owner, where are all the others? But also, how are we lifting each other up in terms of getting ourselves out of just that startup mentality and getting ourselves to like scaling and making really great money? And that is when I really kind of made the decision to where I had always wanted to have a conference. And I thought it was going to be a social media conference or an influencer conference. Like, I just know women empowerment was a part of my brand. And that was something that I loved bringing into whenever I would create videos or just working with clients. And when I would go to these networking events, I was noticing that there wasn't the resources, the ability to like connect with other women. They were a lot older. And I just said, you know what, if no one, like a lot of these spaces, to your point, they are not meant for us. The other couple of weeks ago, I was sitting at the head of the table at my bank with 5 other men, and it felt so powerful and empowering because here I am, a Latina who is literally just speaking truth and facts and taking up space in an environment that's not really for me. And so that's how I decided to go ahead and launch my second business, which is called Hustle and Socialize. And it is a conference for minority businesswomen to really help them grow and scale their business.
Wow. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah.
And I know that's coming. There's a conference coming up, right? There's a conference coming up.
This is our 6th annual conference. So we've been doing it for 6 years. This is the second conference by myself because at the time that I launched Hustle and Socialize, I did have a partner that was co-founded the conference with me. She left in 22 to run for Congress, and so she's now doing that. But Hustle and Socialize is really meant for minority businesswomen, specifically in Texas, but we're growing so much that now outside people are coming to Texas, people from California and Miami, just all these different areas, which is so exciting. But it's really meant to get people to understand how to really be visible and grow profitable businesses. So we focus on 3 different tracks. And these are the core pillars to any type of visibility or any type of business. The first one is money. So we need to get a handle on our numbers. We need to get a handle on our money mindset and how to better manage our wealth. Because some of us, for a lot of us, we didn't come from that generational wealth. Like, we are the ones that are breaking those generational cycles when it comes to money. So we really focus on that money piece. We focus on the marketing piece. Because if you're not marketing yourself in your business, you can't get the word out there. You don't really have that business. And then the mindset piece, right? Exactly. Focusing on how to get our mental health right, how to get our mindset. Some women are moms, some of them are, daughters, friends. Like, there's so many roles that we play. There's a lot of first gen as well. So there's so many roles that we play, and it's really important to have that core mindset piece. So we focus on those 3 things, and really it's taking your business to the next level, putting into action all of the things that you learn, because events and conferences are incredible. And of course, a lot of people love going to these events because we're connecting and networking. But if you're not putting things into action, none of the learning it's going to really not help you in the long run. So we really focus on taking that action and being more visible and just really being unapologetic as well.
I love that. Wow. And when is that
This
happening?
is happening Saturday, June 8th in downtown San Antonio. Yeah. And this
Oh my gosh.
excited is we have a brand new venue, which is the Frostbank Tower on the 24th floor. And so this is a gorgeous high rise. It overlooks the whole entire city. All I can think about is these doors opening and just seeing all of the amazing women that are going to come and take up space in this space that's not meant for people like us, So it's just, I get chills every time I just visualize what's going to happen in June.
I love that. I'm so excited for you and everyone who's going to attend. I want to go with this. For sure. So I guess when it comes to, you were talking about some of the challenges that, that some of the things that are going to come up in this conference, but just in general, what do you think are some of the challenges or barriers that do come up when it comes to Latina women taking up space, either online or offline?
One of the biggest challenges that I see whenever I'm coaching my clients is this notion of imposter syndrome and perfectionism. So imposter syndrome is incredibly huge with anybody who is in these spaces, right? Like, sometimes we feel like we're frauds. Sometimes we feel like we're not worthy of showing our face. I know with a lot of my clients, the initial thought of putting your face out into the world is daunting and is really scary. And a lot of my clients too, for so many of them, this digital world is so brand new to them. I've got clients that have been in business, for 16 plus years, and they've had to learn how to get accustomed to the fast-paced world of the internet and understanding why it's okay to maybe show up a little bit more goofy and not so button up as, professionalism of what we were taught is professionalism. A lot of it too stems from the digital literacy aspect of it, right? Understanding how to upload videos and like why video content is so important in today's world versus back then when the traditional forms of advertising were just television and radio. And so a lot of these women, they come from these backgrounds of, no, we shy away from taking ownership or putting ourselves in these spaces. And so I see that mere challenge of just feeling worthy of taking up space putting, especially when it comes to going to some of these networking events that you don't know anybody who looks like you or you don't see yourself. I always tell my clients, like, if you are the only one in the room, that is incredible because now you are taking up space, you're putting yourself out there, and you're also opening the door and giving others permission to come and join you as well. And so I feel like a lot of those barriers, a huge barrier too, is the access to business resources. Even just standard, getting all the marketing pieces. Sometimes we forget that we have a free resource at the tip of our fingertips. If we wanted to advertise, we can just by hitting the publish button or the post button or the like button, right? And that's all free. We don't have to wait to somebody to give us a stage, which is going back to kind of what we were talking about. Both of us wanted to be, in broadcasting, and we felt like we were waiting for someone to give us that permission. And instead, both of us, took that ownership and was like, no, we're going to do it ourselves. I feel like those things too, it's in business in general, it's understanding how to take up space and what does that look like for you? Because the way I take up space might not be the way someone else takes up space. So really putting it together of like, what is authentic to you? Because that's such a buzzword that we hear, like, be authentic, well, someone's authenticity might not be high energy. Maybe they're a little bit more introvert. And so I think a lot of those challenges is really something that I work with in my coaching. And it's also a barrier or lessening the barrier so that these women can really get a better sense of how to take up space in a way that's really beneficial for them.
Wow. Yeah. All of these things that you mentioned are very real. And these are things that I do see in my clients and that I have also personally experienced because I just like, as you share your story and as I'm reflecting of some of these challenges for myself that I've had experienced, I realized that I made myself small. And I think it's because of all of these limiting beliefs, right, around being quiet and silencing my truth and silencing my story and waiting for somebody else to give me permission to show up. I think a lot of the times we follow a lot of people on social media and they're like, do XYZ, do this like this. And it's like, God, no, I'm going to do things my way on my own terms in the way that feels good for me. And sometimes it may not feel as good at the beginning because that's also really learning how to tune into your body cues, your nervous system, right? It's also about working with that because it's like, yes, there's the intellectual kind of level, which is our brain, but also this work is also internal. It's not like external and showing up. It's also figuring out how do we discover our voice? How do we tap into our own experiences growing up, our own story? And I think that's just such a powerful work. And that comes back to healing, right? And this podcast is really all about healing and manifesting. And I have this little note here that it says, I am the main character of my life. I am a creator and I manifest my dreams with ease.
Oh, I love it.
And I realized like before, thank you. And before I was like, why do I need to, I would just question these things. Why do I feel it was so very frustrating? So there was a lot of internal battles, right? Coming up of like, this is what I want to do. And there's a lot of incongruence of where I'm at and what I want to do. So how do I align with? And I know that for a lot of other Latinas who, maybe grew up low income, maybe grew up not speaking up, maybe grew up whatever, they're introverts or they're not, they just have other ways of showing up. All of these things are valid. Your experiences are valid. And also figure out what's going to be good for you, what's going to feel good and authentic for you. And authentic, as you mentioned, it is such a buzzword, but at the same time, it's like, it needs to really align with your values. It needs to really align with understanding also your emotional and physical boundaries, because I think nowadays, given that social media is so accessible and people are out there and like, I see TikTok, people sharing their entire lives and the whole tea, the whole tea. And I'm like, okay, cool, good for them. I wouldn't personally want to share that because for me, some things are sacred, and I feel like that's really meant for me to protect it, to keep it sacred, to keep it private. So understanding, I think this process is also understanding how do you what is it that's going to feel good, like setting those boundaries, understanding what I'm open to sharing this. I know vulnerability is also a big barrier because a lot of people haven't even like a lot of Latinas, and they struggle with vulnerability. They didn't learn. A lot of these things were not modeled growing up.
Right.
So it's having to unlearn and learn to show up for themselves is going to look very different for everyone. But even vulnerability, allowing yourself to be vulnerable, what does that look like? And I know that comes back to the visibility because people want to see realness. People want to see authentically you show up unapologetically online. And sometimes people fear like, oh, I'm too much. Sometimes it's either I'm too much or I'm not enough. So it's understanding, finding a balance. It's finding a balance, I would say.
Yeah. And it also goes back to the notion of fear of rejection and fear of failure. I feel like my whole story, even as like in my childhood, a lot of it had to deal with like failing. Like I would sometimes fail, standardized tests. I failed my driver's test the first time, and I think the notion of getting back up and trying again and running towards the fear and doing it anyway versus like feeling scared about it. And I think too about just showing up in general. Like I'm a person that's like, the most way that is authentic to me is when I'm sharing things after I have really sort of worked on my healing from. Like I'm never really going to share when I'm in the middle, in the thick of that, because then you could tell I have not healed from it, whether it's a situation, whether it's like 2 years ago, I was dealing with buying out my business partner. And it was really difficult for me because my business partner she's also my best friend. And we had been best friends since we were 10. And so I was navigating the feelings of, this is my hermana, and she's literally like my, person, but I'm also a business owner and my business was failing at the time. Probably 22 was the hardest business year I have had. And at that time, I was 8 years in business, 7 years in business. So it was the hardest year, and navigating that, it was very hard because there would be moments where I would be crying. I would be waking up in a panic attack, fearing the worst about what was going to happen to our friendship and also to the businesses. But I knew that I was not ready to share that part of me online, right? I wasn't ready to fully say like, this is what's going on. And it wasn't until, I'm so grateful that I have a therapist, I have a business advisor, I have a business coach. I surround myself with people that are going to lift me up and give it to me straight. And I feel like that allowed me to really take some time to work on my inner self. And then almost a full year later, I'm able to talk about it on podcasts. I'm able to talk about it in my social media because I've completely, healed from that situation. And so I feel like that vulnerability piece too is like understanding how to show up when you really don't feel like showing up. Like, when do you need to take a mental health day? Like, there's times where I know I'm not feeling great. I have anxiety. So that means like, that's not the day that I'm going to create my content. Right? That's not the day that I want to show my face, but that doesn't mean that I'm not going to show my face. That just means like, hey, I'm going to take a little day for myself. And I think that that's so important for everybody to learn, and that it's okay to fail. Like, that's life and that's business, right? Like, there are things that the only way we could learn and grow is by failing, and it's by like being rejected. I always say like, rejection is that fuel to your purpose. So if I wasn't rejected, I wouldn't have gotten closer to my purpose. And like, every no always leads me to a yes. And that's really how I see like fear of rejection. I just like blaze through it. And I'm like, okay, like I arm myself. I always have that warrior mentality, so to speak.
I love that. And thanks for sharing that. Yeah, rejection is redirection. And I think this is a big one too for me, that sense, that fear of rejection, because we all want to belong. We all want to be seen. We all want to feel heard and validated and acknowledged. And that is a normal, common human experience that we all want. We all want to connect and belong and be part of a community. And that sense of rejection was something that personally came up to me that I had to work, and I'm still working on it. And I think that's something that definitely kept me small, for sure. And I realized that it does take getting to know yourself. It does take doing that inner work. It does take healing, framing, processing, exploring, delving deep into some of these beliefs that you hold and patterns and things that are keeping you small, because everyone is going to have a different story. Everyone's going to have a different experience, and it's your experience, your story is very unique. And understanding that blueprint, understanding your upbringing, your experiences in general as a whole, that's going to be so important and pivotal in this journey and in this process.
Absolutely.
Right. And I guess, Christina, what are other ways that, what is some tips that you can recommend, Latinas who are, in this entrepreneurship, or just in general, like who are wanting to take up space, wanting to show up unapologetically, authentically? What are some of the things that you would recommend, or how to start doing
Know what your secret sazon is. And I love telling everybody this. It's like, know at least 1 to 3 things that make you you, and only you can do that. No one else, right? Because once you know, like, my secret sazon is my energy. My secret sazon is like the way I just like light up a room. Like, I believe that I'm like fire and I just calm, right? So like, I know that no one else has my energy. And that is one thing that I really put as the forefront of the way I command space in a offline situation. Like when I show up at a networking event or at a conference, I know that a huge part of my brand is the pink, and me being from South Texas, I'm a proud South Texan. So, I always make sure that anytime I'm out in the wild, I'm always wearing something that reminds me of my cultura and my home, and being proud of being, from Texas, and being proud of being from the Valley and San Antonio. These little things, because they really make you stand out. And so when you know what your secret sazon is, that spiciness that only you have, then it allows you to create content from that space. And it allows you to be seen and really kind of take notion of like, oh, that's, for example, like that's Christina. She wears a lot of pink, or like her Instagram is very vibrant. And that's only something that only, I have. And so I feel like practicing getting comfortable with like being uncomfortable. So one of the things that I really love to do to challenge myself is I do love to put myself in uncomfortable situations, whether it's like going, one thing I did 2 years ago was I bought a ticket to a conference where I knew no one. It was just me. And I didn't know a single soul there. And I did that so that I could be around other like-minded people, but that I could get comfortable being in spaces that don't look like me, or that I don't know anybody. And that really helped me get out of my, comfort zone, get out of my shell, and really put myself in situations that allow me to problem solve and allow me to say like, okay, this is why I do belong here. Like, I belong in these spaces, and use that secret sazon to really kind of just enroll people in my vision. And I think like those things are super important. And then when it comes to just content creation, or, creating video content, you could always practice beforehand. Like, practice really does make better performance. So I would always just use my phone and my laptop to write out my script, shoot it, get myself familiar with how I talk, my inflections, my body language, and just keep creating video content. Because the more content you put out, the better it's just going to become year after year. And if you don't start now, then, 6 months from now, a year from now, you're not going to be fully where you need to be. So even just like taking the messy action is the best action you could take, because imagine where you're going to be like 6 months from now. That's always what I think.
I love that. Thanks for sharing that. And I'm also thinking, what about like the girlies who are not so much on social media, but they're just really trying to find their voice, trying to show up for themselves, trying to build that self-trust, that self-confidence. What are some of is there anything that you recommend them to do, or how to start showing up for themselves in that way and taking up
Yeah,
space?
I love really going inward and looking internally. Writing is such a healing way for me to just get out all of my thoughts and emotions. And I feel like when you write and when you journal, you start noticing the thoughts and you start noticing your own voice, because when you're putting pen to paper and you're writing, that's coming from you, no one else, right? It's not a script. It's not AI. It's not ChatGPT. Like, it is you. And so really a lot of the work that I do inward is I spend a good 20 to 30 minutes every day just journaling and getting my thoughts out, rewiring my brain and looking at some beliefs that I have around money, around taking up space, and just looking to see like how I can create my own destiny and my own sort of life. Like, I'm the builder and the creator of my, life. And luckily, like, everything is meeting me where I'm at. And so I think just starting with that, taking the time to spend in silence with yourself, and even just like moments with yourself, because only you know yourself. And
Yeah.
that was one thing that I think I learned in business, is that I would always seek outwards. Like, with any problem that I would have in my business, whether it was like, why am I not getting enough clients, or why am I not making this much money? What do I do now? I was always looking for outside sources to provide me with that validation of what to do next. And it wasn't until I really like, really had to say like, shut up and like, let them go, like really release them and look inward.
Yeah.
Just listen to me,
Oh my
right? Like, listen to my intuition and listen to my gut. Like, if it was not a hell no or a hell yes, then it was a hell no. And the only way I could really trust myself is by doing like those deep reflection exercises, because I was building trust.
I love that. And I would totally recommend that too. Going inward, releasing the distraction.
Yeah.
That's a big one that I always tell my clients, and myself included, because when I was starting this podcast, I have a list of so many podcast ideas, and I was like, boom, 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 boom. And then I would listen to so many other podcasts, and I'm like, ooh, this would be a really great idea. But on my hot take, my approach, given my expertise and my experiences, and I would just write ideas. And it came to a point where I was watching YouTube videos on how to, and all of these things. And I think information is knowledge, information is power. And yet tapping into your intuition, tapping into silence, tapping into your inner voice, that's what's actually really important too. So I realized I need to really remove the distractions, eliminate or like lower the volume for that. And right now, that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm just really trying to stay more focused and grounded. Because when we're not grounded, there's so many ways and approaches that we can go. And I think at the end of the day, there's that noise. That noise is always going to be there. So we have to really tune inward, checking in with yourself, checking in with your body, checking in with how you're feeling, your intuition. I think another thing that I want to recommend also, regulating your nervous system, right? Because it's also the thing believes And all of these narratives that we tell ourselves, and all of these fears and worries and anxieties and fears and wounds of rejection and all of these things, that can definitely keep us in this either fight, flight, freeze, fawn mode, to a point where we're only intellectualizing, we're only here, but we're not here.
Yes.
We're not in our entire wholeness and being. And that's where we need to also practice and cultivate. And that can look like taking deep breaths, journaling, going inward, reflecting, movement, moving your body, deep breathing, dancing, whatever is it that brings you back into homeostasis, elated, grounded self. That's also that's where you're going to find and hear all of the answers for yourself. So that's something that I definitely recommend.
Absolutely. You know, it's so funny. I always say that business is like 90% mindset and like regulating your nervous system and like 10% strategy. Like, I think so many people are like, give me the strategy, which is like, yeah, we need business strategy. We need like understanding all the different facets of building a business. But the more you grow and the more you scale and the more money you make, that's where you have to double down on checking in with yourself and your nerve and knowing those responses, right? Like, I've really I would say in the last 3 years, I've really taken a hard look at like how I respond to stress and where do I show up in freeze moments, right? And like, where am I in my survival moments and like how to get out of that. And so I think too, it's very interesting how all of this really brings up so many things that we have to heal.
And especially when you're an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Like, for me, that's literally what activated my money trauma, my money wounds, my mother and father wounds, my, like the insecurities and the fear of rejection. That's when you're embarking and leveling up in your life, either in business, in relationships, in your career. That is when you are put to the test. And that's when all of these wounds and things that come up that perhaps we haven't worked, or maybe we need to take another look and like reframe and reprocess and figure out how to be more empowered, right? And shift the narrative. That's actually really important. And yeah, this comes up as I mentioned, when we are leveling up.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah. So, okay. I guess, where can people find you? Where can people work with you? How can they start working with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So everyone can find me on Instagram. That's my preferred platform. I'm at the Social Butterfly Gal. And then Hustle and Socialize is at Hustle and Socialize. For working with me, I have private coaching that I do one-on-one. And then I have a group coaching program called the Confidence Collective. And then, of course, we have tickets on sale right now for Hustle and Socialize conference. We have the conference every June. So this year it's June 8th, 2024 in downtown San Antonio. And then if you're in the San Antonio surrounding areas, we do quarterly events every quarter. So you can get tapped into our community and follow us.
Wow. Thank you so much, Christina, for being here. It's so lovely to talk to you and have these conversations, and you're sharing your knowledge and your wisdom and expertise. And I really appreciate that. Don't forget to tune in to listen on Spotify, watch it on YouTube, subscribe, follow, and share it with your loved ones. Thank you so much, Christina. We'll see you, everyone, on the next episode. Thank you. Bye.